Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Wednesday the 7th of September 2022. News. Capercaillie, Scotland's most threatened bird, at the edge of extinction. This article is by Martin Williams. Conservationists have warned the extinction clock is approaching midnight for Scotland's most threatened bird. Despite attempts to save Scotland's capercaillie, whose populations in the UK are confined to the Highlands, the latest surveys are showing a continuing decline. Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust says that when surveys commenced in 1991, capercaillie numbered approximately 2,200 birds, spread from Argyll in Perthshire to the south and West Aberdeenshire in the east and Rossshire in the north. Just 5 years ago, a national survey revealed there may be as few as 1,114 individuals. Now, the GWCT say perhaps only 300 to 400 birds remain, with 90% confined to one area of Strathspey in Inverness-shire. GWCT is now calling for urgent policy and practical action to ease the continued pressure on the popular native bird, whose Gaelic name translates as the horse of the woods. The world's largest grouse and an iconic species of old pine woods was reintroduced to Scotland in 1837 from Swedish stock after becoming extinct the previous century. A steep decline in recent years has seen the largest member of the grouse family included on the red list of species of highest conservation concern. The trusts say the bird is now living in fragments of the once widespread Caledonian forest, where it is in severe trouble. Sharp declines are occurring because fewer chicks hatch and survive in Scotland than elsewhere in their European and Russian range. In August, the Trust completed its 33rd consecutive year of capercaillie brood surveys, and it discovered a continued decline in breeding success over time. GWCT research has shown that capercaillie breed better in years when June weather is dry and warm, and in forests where predators such as carrion crow and pine marten are fewer. This year, despite good weather, the survey found only 0.4 chicks fledged per female, below the 0.6 chicks needed to maintain numbers. This was the 5th consecutive year when insufficient chicks fledged, thus hastening the decline, says the Trust. Despite well-intentioned conservation programmes to improve capercaillie habitat, extinction seems likely within the next 30 to 50 years, it said. Earlier this year, scientific advisors to Nature Scot reviewed causes of decline and urged 4 immediate management actions. To increase breeding success, they recommend reducing the effect of predators by lethally controlling foxes and crows and translocating legally protected pine martens from capercaillie forests. It also provided remaining predators with alternative diversionary food. The Trust says Nature Scot is still to address the need for proven, immediately available alternatives to protect capercaillie broods. Lead surveyor Dr. David Baines, GWCT's head of upland research, commented, "The end is nigh for capercaillie unless we quickly turn around the low chick survival. Pine martens have increased in recent decades and are known to consume capercaillie eggs and chicks. Their licensed removal from key capercaillie strongholds is urgently required to help avoid species extinction." The capercaillie is the world's largest grouse. Males, unmistakable with their slate grey plumage, blue sheen head and bright red eye ring, can reach around 90 centimetres in length and 14 pounds in weight. Females are smaller with brown and chestnut red feathers and fan-shaped tails. Despite their size, capercaillie are fairly elusive, often sitting quietly in pine trees or on the forest floor. In spring, however, they can be seen gathering at communal leks, the male's courtship display in the hope of attracting a mate. There were around 20,000 birds across Scotland in 1970, but a survey conducted by RSPB Scotland during the winter of 2015-16 revealed just 1,114 birds, around half the size of the population in 1993, when the first survey estimated there were 2,200. Will Anderson, Chief Executive of Seafield and Strathpay Estates, who hosted this year's survey, added, "We have been managing and extending our forests to benefit capercaillie for over 30 years, and it would appear that neither habitat extent nor quality is limiting their numbers. We are concerned that in a year where weather is also unlikely to be a limiting factor, we have such poor brood numbers. We carry out legal predator control, but there is no mechanism available to us for managing the impacts of protected predators, and we await the response to a ministerial briefing following a Nature Scot report for guidance on what further steps we can take to halt the decline of this important component of our pinewood habitats." This article is by Martin Williams. The Herald, Wednesday the 7th of September 2022. News. Herald Scotland. Face masks no longer required by care home visitors and staff. This article is by Emma Sabliak. COVID-19 guidance in Scottish care homes has been further relaxed due to a sharp drop in coronavirus infections. Face masks will no longer be a part of the guidance issued to social care staff and visitors from next week. The Scottish Government attributed the drop in coronavirus cases to the vaccination programme as it relaxed its guidance. More than 12 million COVID-19 vaccine doses have been received by Scots across the country. Social Care Minister Kevin Stewart said the move was the latest step in our path to recovering from the pandemic. Nevertheless, masks and face coverings could still be recommended in certain circumstances, such as if there is a local outbreak of the virus. Individuals will also continue to be able to wear a mask if they choose to do so. Care providers have been told to implement the new guidance from September the 14th onwards, or earlier if they are ready to do so. Speaking as the change was announced, Mr. Stewart said, "Our phenomenally successful vaccination programme has driven down infections and saved the NHS from untold pressures. Removing the need for face masks in social care settings, including care homes, is the latest step in our path to recovering from the pandemic. This will make communication and relationships easier in care settings, benefiting mental health and promoting the rights and choices of those working in and using social care." This article is by Emma Sabliak. The Herald, Tuesday the 6th of September 2022. News. Glasgow, Sauchiehall Street, Watt Brothers Store Hotel Plan by James and Sandy Easdale rejected. This article is by Ian McConnell. A planning application by businessmen brothers Sandy and James Easdale to develop the vacant former Watt Brothers department store at Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow into a hotel has been refused by Glasgow City Council. The decision by the council was issued yesterday. The proposal for the 119 to 121 Sauchiehall Street site was for part use of vacant store as hotel, including upper floor and link bridge extensions and external alterations. In the wake of the decision, Labour MSP for Glasgow, Paul Sweeney, tweeted, "Delighted that this proposal to plonk a hideous eyesore on top of one of Glasgow's finest, earliest 20th century buildings has been refused planning permission by Glasgow City Council today. Well done to everyone who objected. Let the message go out to developers, raise your game." When former Rangers directors Sandy and James Easdale announced their purchase of the landmark building in September 2020, they revealed their rejuvenation plan was expected to cost more than £20 million. Sandy Easdale said then, "This is a landmark building, loved by generations of Glaswegians. It was sad to see the store close last year, but when the opportunity arose to purchase the building and redevelop it for the future, then we knew we had to take it. It has a proud past and we are certain it will have an even brighter future. This project will play an important part in reinvigorating this part of Sauchiehall Street." James Easdale said at that stage, "The building has more than a century of history and tradition and benefits from brilliant Art Deco features. This is one of the attractions of the building and will play a part in its rejuvenation. Whilst many are shying away from investing during the pandemic, we are very optimistic that the economy will bounce back in due course. Our transport businesses remain hugely important to us, but investing in property and construction is a real focus at a time when new opportunities are constantly presenting themselves." This article is by Ian McConnell.
Recorded from the Herald on the 7th of September 2022. From the sports section, recorded by Amy. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst makes can't compete admission after Rangers suffer Ajax rout in Champions League opener. By Christopher Jack. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst insists it's too much to ask to expect Rangers to compete in the Champions League following their crushing 4-0 defeat to Ajax. The Dutchman saw his side embarrassed in Amsterdam as their Group A campaign got off to a dreadful start just days after their abject Old Firm loss against Celtic. Quickfire goals from Edson Alvarez, Steven Bergwijn and Mohamed Kudus clinched the win in a first half that saw Alfred Schroeder's side outclass their visitors. And the rout was complete with 10 minutes remaining thanks to a Steven Bergwijn effort that added a richly deserved shine to the scoreline for the Dutch Giants. Van Bronckhorst insisted pre-match that he was content with the business Rangers completed in the transfer market as he defended the decision not to add to his 7 summer signings. But the lack of strength and depth in the team and the squad was exposed in the Johan Cruyff Arena and the remaining fixtures with Napoleon Liverpool, as well as the return clash with Ajax, will rightly concern supporters. Van Bronckhorst said, "Their performance wasn't good, the players are committed. They want us to play the way we want. They want to fight, they want to work hard. But against an opponent like Ajax, when you're not organised in the way you should be, it's going to be really tough. I think the level we're used to and the level we need to reach in the Champions League is a big difference. To compete in the Champions League, you need hundreds of millions, otherwise you can't compete. Look at Ajax, they sold players worth over £200 million. Look at Liverpool as well. For us to compete with them, it's too much to ask. We want to compete, but we want to compete with the squad we have, and the squad we're capable of making. We knew it would be tough, and it showed today." That article was by Christopher Jack.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 7th of September 2022. From the Voices section, Adam Tompkins. If Liz Truss really is a child of the Union, she must ditch the ideology and let pragmatism rule. It is a new dawn and the country is waking up, rubbing its eyes, trying to recall where it is and what those blurry shapes mean. The political summer was so long and drawn out, and so endlessly repetitive, that we fell into a deep, sun-soaked siesta, only the occasional warbler waking through the dreamscape. It is the beginning of the age of Truss. Despite the prolonged leadership battle she has just endured, none of us has much idea, at this early hour of the morning, what that age will bring. For there are at least 2 Liz Trusses, and no one yet knows which one is going to count. The one on display this summer was designed to appeal only to 170,000 members of the most exclusive voting club in British politics, the paid-up loyalists of the Tory tribe. Whilst all normal people will have dozed the summer off, this strange collective had a job to do, and most of them will have paid attention, and will have tried to do their duty solemnly. The good news is, now that's done, they can retreat into the shadows of organising raffles, moaning about the BBC, and tut-tutting at everything in general, and nothing in particular. This is a tribe that hates handouts, craves tax cuts, considers Keir Starmer to be a dreary irrelevance, and Nicola Sturgeon to be a menace who should be caged or neutered. Liz Truss is of this tribe, and knows her audience well. She might be an excruciating orator, those gut-wrenching pauses for applause, that vacant grinning stare, but she is nothing like as stupid as she so painfully often looks. She has that first and most important political skill in spades. She can read the room, and she knew exactly what to say to her audience this summer to make them pick her and dump her rival. If this is the Liz Truss that walks into Downing Street this week, her administration will crash and burn. For now is the time for handouts. Now is not the time for tax cuts. Labour is to be taken seriously, and the SNP needs no imprisoning. The Supreme Court will see to that, and politically the best thing a Truss government can do regarding the Union is nothing. Just leave it alone. Treat the First Minister and her government with respect, of course, but otherwise just leave them alone to make their own mistakes. After all, they need no encouragement on that front. More of that later. I fear that the new Prime Minister will indeed seek to govern as she has campaigned, but, as I have written about her before, I hope to God I'm wrong. And what gives me cautious hope that my fears may be misplaced is that, if you look at matters differently, another Liz Truss emerges. This second Liz Truss, for which the most part was carefully shrouded over the summer, is like the pragmatist. I do not know her, I've never met her, but the thing I most like and admire about what I have read of her is that she is not frightened to change her mind. I love the fact she used to be a monarchy-bashing member of the Young Liberal Democrats. I used to be a monarchy-bashing member of the Labour Party, but that was a long time ago. Some say she has 5 cabinet jobs in the last 8 years, and has left each without a trace. I'm not sure that is true. Lawyers in particular remember her dismal time as Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, but, if it were, I would regard it as an enormous compliment. For the best Tories are those who understand that government is stewardship, and that the function of Secretary of State is to do nothing, save leave your department in better shape than it was when you arrived. The point of the Tory party, after all, is simply to hold office, thereby ensuring that the other lot, who take a wrecking ball to the economy given half a chance, are rooted in opposition benches, where they can do no harm. Such, at any rate, used to be the point of the Tory party, back in the day when it actually believed in conserving things, rather than breaking them. If Liz Truss can steer the Tory party back to this old conservatism, so much the better. To do so, however, she will have to ditch the ideological trust of the campaign trail and resurrect the pragmatist trust that was kept under wraps this summer. Her immediate priority, of course, must be to tackle the genuine crisis, a much overused word, but here there really is a crisis, as regards the cost of living. Energy bills are out of control, and absolutely must be reined in. That is going to be ridiculously expensive and will need statist, interventionist measures. Market regulation and tax cuts simply will not do. But, as further exemplified, Public emergencies require emergency measures, and the cost of living crisis is no exception. Pragmatism, not ideology, is what we need here. I hope she's so busy and focused on addressing this problem that she pays no heed to the Constitution, nor to the Union. The Tory party's instinct that Nicola Sturgeon is a menace to all we hold dear is of course correct. She is. But the solution to that problem is not to take the law to muzzle her. Next month, the Supreme Court will hear argument about the lawfulness of any goat alone in Ref 2. Let the judges take care of all that. There is no need for any fiddling with the rules of referendums. If Liz Truss really is a child of the Union she professes to be, she will leave the damn thing alone. Pragmatism, not hard ideology, is what is needed here too. And that article was by Adam Tompkins. Adam Tompkins was a Conservative MSP for the Glasgow region from 2016 to 2021. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 8th of September 2022, from the news section, Dr. Peter Coshan, body of former Fettes College teacher found in Northumberland, by Jodie Harrison. Police have confirmed the body of a man discovered in Northumberland has been identified as former Fettes College teacher Dr. Peter Coshan, following a cross-border search. Dr. Coshan, 75, disappeared from the Seafield Road area of Edinburgh on August 11th, before midnight, and was reported missing the following day. The body was found on land close to the A696 near the village of Kirkwelpington on Sunday, September the 4th. Specialist officers were seen close to the scene, combing woodland more than 80 miles away from his home in Edinburgh. His family has been made aware, and specialist officers are continuing to provide support to them. Two men, aged 27 and 63, have previously been arrested and charged in connection with Dr. Coshan's death. Detective Superintendent Andrew Patrick of Police Scotland's Major Investigation Team said, "Our thoughts remain with Peter's family at this incredibly difficult time. I would again like to thank everyone who has come forward with information which has helped our investigation." And that article is by Jodie Harrison. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 8th of September 2022, from the news section, Oban rescue Lismore Island, two saved from life raft after abandoning sinking boat. Report by Jodie Harrison. Two people have been rescued after they had to abandon their sinking fishing boat and take to a life raft. The pair issued a mayday call to report that their fishing vessel was taking on significant amounts of water in the vicinity of Lismore Island, near Oban, Scotland, at around 3 AM on Thursday, the Coast Guard said. They abandoned the boat and climbed onto their life raft, where they stayed until they were rescued towards 4 AM. The RNLI Oban all-weather lifeboat went to the scene and rescued the pair before taking them back to Oban in Argyll Butte, arriving at around 5 AM. The lifeboat reached the scene before a Coast Guard helicopter, which was also called out to the incident. A Coast Guard spokesman said, "We had calm weather, which was a blessing. Thankfully, it was quite close to Lismore Island and the sea was reasonably benign for them." The crew were said to be fine, although a bit shaken after the experience. The boat, a commercial fishing vessel, is now partially submerged. And that story was by Jodie Harrison.
The Herald, Friday the 9th of September 2022. News. Crimea. Mystery Highlanders war medals found in Victorian desk's secret drawer. This article is by Jodie Harrison. They were prized relics of bravery in a battle which went down in history as one of the most heroic ever fought by the British Army. Yet for more than a century they languished away from sight, hidden in a secret drawer invisible to the naked eye. It was only during a routine cleaning and an attempt to flush out cobwebs that they once more fell under human gaze, and now a search has been launched to trace the family of the man who received them in light of his bravery all those years ago. Pensioner David Grant, 71, was restoring an antique Victorian desk in his loft when he discovered the trove belonging to armourer Sergeant Edward Webb of the Sutherland Highlanders Regiment. Sergeant Webb was among a two-deep line of around 500 infantry who stood firm against a force of around 2,500 Russian cavalrymen during the battle, in an episode immortalised by historians as the Thin Red Line incident. The medals, Sergeant Webb's Crimea Medal, Army Long Service Medal and Good Conduct Medal, were hidden behind a panel in a writing slope inside a secret compartment activated by a spring mechanism concealed in a crack in the wood. Mystery surrounds how they got there, and a few details of Armourer Webb's life remains beside his name. Mr. Grant of Devon said it was a portal to another world, and obviously tremendously exciting. I felt a pulse of electricity shoot through me as the panel popped open and revealed the secret drawers behind. It was like a gadget from an old James Bond movie, and then I saw the medals staring up at me along with this man's photo. His descendants are out there somewhere, and it would be wonderful to find them. Sergeant Webb's portrait was discovered along with the medals, a lock of hair and a watch fob presented to him on leaving the army. Staff at Baldwin and Sons Auctioneers on the Strand in London say they desperately want to trace his descendants ahead of the medals going under the hammer on September the 15th, and hope that someone looking at his photo might see a resemblance. While little is known about Sergeant Webb, the battle in which he fought is the stuff of legend. On the 25th of October 1854, Sergeant Webb and his comrades were guarding a supply base at the village of Balaklava when they spotted the Russian cavalry massed on the horizon. As the enemy galloped towards them and their Turkish comrades fled in terror, the regiment's commander, Sir Colin Campbell, decided he would make no attempt to put a gloss on their likely fate. "There is no retreat from here, men," he told them. "You must die where you stand." Typical of the stoicism of the times, a junior officer quickly replied, "Aye, aye, Sir Colin. If needs be, we'll do that." Sir Colin believed his men were insufficiently trained to form a defensive square and instead marshalled them into two lines. With seemingly little chance of survival, the red tunic soldiers stood firm and met the charge head-on, firing 2 volleys at 500 and 200 yards, bringing hundreds of Russian soldiers crashing to earth and forcing an unlikely retreat. The unexpected rout sparked a bayonet charge by some of the younger soldiers, but they were called back by Sir Colin, who called out, 93rd, 93rd, damn all that eagerness." Witnessing the spectacle, London Times correspondent William Russell wrote that all that remained between the charging Russians and the British regiment's base of operations was a thin red streak tipped with steel, later paraphrased as the Thin Red Line episode. The incident inspired painter Robert Gibbs' oil-on-canvas masterpiece, The Thin Red Line, 1881, which today hangs in the National War Museum in Edinburgh. Sergeant Webb later returned to civilian life after completing more than 30 years' service. A watch fob also found in the drawer is engraved to Armour Sergeant E. Webb from the Sergeant's XCI PLH, June the 9th, 1874, which is understood to have been the date of his leaving. It's believed his widow later placed his personal effects in the secret drawer for safekeeping before her family later sold it. The writing slope was eventually acquired by David Grant's London-based grandmother, who gifted it to him as a schoolboy. Records which might have helped trace Webb's descendants were destroyed in a fire which swept through the National Archives in Kew in 2014. Mark Smith, medals expert at Baldwin and Sons, said, "The courage of Sergeant Webb and his comrades that day has become part of battlefield folklore and they are rightly lionised in the history books. We've put a lot of work into trying to find his descendants, but sadly the records which might have helped us have all been destroyed. His regiment was headquartered in Scotland, but we don't know what happened to him after he left the army. It's possible that someone out there might look at the photo and see a resemblance to a web they know. We'd love to hear from them. In the meantime, these medals will serve as a fitting reminder of the heroism of that famous day. The medals are being auctioned with a guide price of £2,000. This article is by Jodie Harrison. The Herald, Friday the 9th of September 2022. News. Death of Queen Elizabeth. Alex Salmond to attend Accession Council. This article is by Emma Sabliak. Alex Salmond will attend the Accession Council after a top official in his Alba party called for an end to the monarchy in Scotland after the death of the Queen. The Alba leader revealed he will be among 200 Privy Councillors to attend the accession of King Charles. He is one of hundreds of members of the Privy Council. It comes after Alba General Secretary Chris McElhenney said there was no place for King Charles in an independent Scotland. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will also be an eyewitness to the event at St James's Palace in London, which is due to take place at 10 a.m. The Accession Council is usually convened within 24 hours of the death of a monarch, but it has been delayed after the death of Queen Elizabeth was not announced until the evening on Thursday. It is divided into two parts, with the first part seeing the Privy Council proclaim the sovereign and the second part seeing King Charles III hold his first Privy Council. After confirming his attendance, Mr Salmond referred to the new monarch swearing an oath to uphold the claim of right of 1689 during the Privy Council as the sort of history which can shape the future. In the second part of the Accession Council, King Charles will read and sign an oath to uphold the security of the Church in Scotland. Mr Salmond tweeted, "In part 2 of the Council, the new King is required to swear an oath to uphold the separation of Church and State in Scotland in accordance with the claim of right. The claim of right of 1689 is not the bee's knees in many quarters because of its 17th century anti-Catholicism, and very understandably so, but the idea of a contractual monarchy was first introduced into Scotland, thought in the 14th century appeals to the Avignon papacy, and the high principles of equality in the American Declaration of Independence coexisted with the evil of slavery for the best part of a century, but these principles of equality were still well worth saying." He said the Act is properly seen as part of a golden thread of Scottish constitutional thought, stretching from the Arbroath Declaration to the present day. He concluded, "In any event, it can hardly be argued that the claim of right is merely a historical curiosity when one of the first acts of the new king is to be required to swear an oath to uphold it. This is the sort of history which can shape the future." His attendance follows a strongly worded statement from Alba Party's Mr McElhenney. The very idea of retaining the monarchy in an independent Scotland to allow Charles, the Duke of Rothesay, to be our constitutional head of state would be the antithesis of actual independence for Scotland, he wrote. Although traditionally all 700 Privy Councillors would attend, the Succession Council has been dramatically scaled down due to a lack of space and concerns over safety. Some senior politicians and members of the celery have been priorities, with the remaining 500 being balloted for a chance at a seat. Former First Minister of Scotland, Jack McConnell, was one of the politicians who did not manage to snag a seat. He tweeted, "Best wishes to all my fellow Privy Councillors who were successful in the ballot to attend this morning's proclamation of King Charles III, a rare historical moment. Meanwhile, it's the train to Scotland for me. This article is by Emma Sabliak.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 9th of September 2022, from the sports section, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has lost to Ange Postecoglou on the park and off it this week. Could he lose the Rangers job too? By Graham McGarry. Can you hear it? If you're quiet and stay very still, you can just about make it out. That's right, it's the world's smallest violin, and it's playing just for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. Of course, as the Rangers manager whined about the financial disparity in his post-match interview on Wednesday night, after watching his team take their second 4-goal chasing in 4 days, it was a little hard to make it out above the thousands of cups of tea being simultaneously and forcefully sputtered out by fans of smaller Scottish clubs. Setting aside that delicious slice of irony, even for a large number of Rangers supporters, their manager's comments took the cake. To compete in the Champions League, you need hundreds of millions, Van Bronckhorst said. Otherwise, you can't compete. To win the tournament, perhaps he's right. There is some truth in what he says. But there was no excuse for his players failing to at least compete in the night in Amsterdam, and it was the last thing fans wanted to hear after yet another abject display. Dinamo Zagreb defeated Chelsea in this match day, after all, where Liverpool's wage budget far exceeds that of Napoli, who tonked the English Premier League side later in the evening. The basics, not allowing free headers from corners, working hard for the team. The Rangers players ran 6 kilometres less than the Ajax players collectively. Don't cost a thing. It was the fatalistic tone of Van Bronckhorst's comments that was so alarming for Rangers supporters, tens of thousands of whom have forked out £180 to watch 3 Champions League ties at Ibrox, don't forget, as well as hundreds more for away trips. I wonder how sales would have gone had the marketing slogan been a rousing, "We can't compete." On the other side of the city, Ange Postecoglou knows just as well as Van Bronckhorst does that his team are at a financial disadvantage compared to the giants of European football, but compare and contrast his rhetoric from before and after Celtic's defeat to Real Madrid to that of the Ibrox manager. Postecoglou was true to his word that his team were going down swinging, taking the game to Madrid and making their match a real contest for the best part of an hour before the class of the European champions shone through. The mood after the game in Celtic Park, though, despite the 3-0 loss, was almost buoyant, and it was certainly defiant rather than defeatist. That all stemmed from the words and actions of the manager. The end result might have been similar, but the timbre of managers' pronouncements and the resultant performances of their teams could hardly have been more different. Yes, Postecoglou has the Premiership trophy in his hippie, and a 4-1 win over Rangers at the weekend to put him on rock-solid ground with his supporters in any case, but his refusal to settle for Celtic's presumed place in the European food chain and his commitment to playing on the front foot no matter the opposition, he has the Celtic fans enraptured. The only black cloud in the Celtic horizon at the minute is the looming nagging worry that Postecoglou's work, so long dismissed even here in Scotland because of his origins and where he was operating, is no longer going unnoticed. If losing Brendan Rodgers to Leicester City stuck in the craw, losing Postecoglou to Brighton would be the sickener to end them all. No one would reasonably argue that Brighton are a bigger club than Celtic, out with the crazed ramblings of perhaps some Mockney Talksport wind-up merchant, but in the modern game, the Seagulls will be soaring ahead of the Celts when it comes to finances, even taking into account the Champions League money that is rolling in this season. Would a crack at the English Premier League be enough to tempt Postecoglou away? Perhaps one day, but at the risk of looking even more of a wally than I already do, I would be stunned if it was now. Celtic are in the midst of a Champions League group that not only looks to offer a fair to decent shot at qualification for the knockout stage, but also offers Postecoglou the chance to manage his team against Real Madrid in the Bernabeu. In his own words, the club currently offers everything that he has ever wanted. This time next week I could be writing this column with a great dollop of egg in my face, as nothing should surprise anyone in football, but I'll rest the Yoki visage and say Postecoglou isn't going anywhere. The same may not be said for Van Bronckhorst, though for very different reasons. If Rangers fail to win against Aberdeen at Pittodrie on Saturday, should the match go ahead, then the Dutchman's position will come under major scrutiny, even this early in the season. In the past week, Van Bronckhorst has already lost 2 battles on the pitch, and there were awards off it. His job might well be next. And that article is by Graham McGarry. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 9th of September 2022, from the sports section. Which sporting events have been affected following the death of the Queen? Sporting events are being cancelled following the death of the Queen, and more is expected to follow as a national period of mourning begins. Decisions regarding future postponements in the calendar are set to be determined following consideration of official mourning guidance set to be issued by the Cabinet Office. However, it is understood that it will be left to sports event organisers to decide how to proceed, and postponements will not be mandatory. A meeting involving representatives from sports governing bodies and the government is scheduled for Friday morning. Here, the PA News Agency looks at matches and events which have been affected by the news. Football. Manchester United's Europa League clash with Real Sociedad at Old Trafford, and West Ham's game against FCSB in the Europa Conference League at the London Stadium went ahead on Thursday evening, with pre-match tributes. The Northern Ireland Football League announced that Friday night's matches between Cliftonville and Glentoran and Larne and Dungannon have been postponed. The English Football League also confirmed that Friday night's championship game between Burnley and Norwich and the League 2 match between Tranmere and Stockport had been postponed, with a decision on Saturday's fixtures yet to be made. The Scottish Professional Football League announced that Friday evening championship clash between Dundee and Cove Rangers was off. Cricket. Friday's play between England and South Africa men at the Oval, along with all scheduled matches in the Rachel Hale Flint Trophy, will not take place. Rugby Union. Northampton announced the postponement of their Premiership Rugby Cup clash against Saracens scheduled for Thursday evening. The Scottish Rugby Union has postponed all domestic competitive games this weekend as a mark of respect, and the Women's Summer Test International between Scotland and Spain on Sunday is also off. Rugby League. The RFL postponed Friday's Betfred Championship fixture between Sheffield Eagles and Dewsbury Rams, but the first Super League elimination playoff between Catalans Dragons and Leeds will go ahead, as it is taking place in Perpignan, France. Further announcements about the weekend's fixtures at all levels were set to be made as soon as possible, the governing body said. Golf. Play was suspended for the day at the BMW PGA Championship, and there will be no play on Friday. Horse racing. Racing at Southwell in Chelmsford on Thursday evening was abandoned. The British Horse Racing Authority also announced the meetings scheduled for Friday, including the third day of the St Leger meeting at Doncaster, have also been cancelled. Athletics. The Great North Run, the world's largest half marathon, is set for Sunday. Organisers cancelled its 5k sister event on Friday, with a decision of the main race due on Friday. Cycling. Friday's Tour of Britain stage was promptly cancelled, and later on Thursday evening the rest of the tour, which was set to finish on the Isle of Wight on Sunday, was called off entirely. Boxing. The weigh-in for Saturday's proposed bout between Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields will take place behind closed doors. And that article was unattributed.
The Herald, the 9th of September, and the Voices section. Alan Garner, whose Booker Prize list at 88 proves oldies have so much to offer, by Teddy Jameson. There are, I know, few reasons to be cheerful these days. There's a war in Europe, the ice caps are melting, Liz Truss is the new Prime Minister, and Sterling Albion could only draw at the weekend. So, you know, hell, handcart, all that. In the circumstances then, any bit of good news, however small, should be cherished. In which case, let's all raise a glass to Alan Garner, who, at the age of 88, has become the oldest author to make the shortlist of the Booker Prize with his latest book, Treacle Walker. The Ghana should be in contention for one of the most auspicious of literary prizes, some 62 years after he published his first book. The Weird Stone of Brisingamen is a testament to both his creativity and his endurance. He makes M. John Harrison, who won the Goldsmiths Prize in 2020, aged 75, for his novel The Sunken Land Begins to Rise Again, to look like a mere tyro. It's also good to be reminded that art is not a young person's game. As a culture, we tend to fixate on the next big thing. And that's not surprising. There is always something thrilling about the shock of the new. These days, I'm mildly obsessed with the music of Ethel Cain, Yaya Bay, and Docelli, all of whom I've discovered in 2022. But there is also something heroic about artists who rage against the dying of the light, who continue to create long after they've reached pensionable age. Think of Matisse in his 80s, unable to paint and confined to bed, cutting up painted paper and making vibrant, life-enhancing collages out of them. Works like The Snail, 1953, or his picture book Jazz, 1947, sing with colour. Although Louise Bourgeois, the French-American sculptor who was born in 1911 and didn't have a first retrospective until 1982, and was still making art in 2010, the year she died. And, if anything, the art of J.M.W. Turner became wilder and more potent the older he got. What should be celebrated is the creative urge, the need in some artists to continue to work, to create, to continue to find a voice, even if that voice is not in fashion. Age offers a different palette. Experience, mortality, loss all move the fore. To listen to Johnny Cash sing the Trent Reznor song Hurt is to hear a man confronting the end of life. He died less than a year after the record was released. Not all will produce the best work in old age. I'm not sure many would consider House of Gucci Ridley Scott's best movie. But the octogenarian is still on film sets, marshalling an army of actors, designers and technicians to bring his vision to the screen. Doesn't need to be. Presumably, he wants to be. We can get sentimental about late artistic flowerings, but the best work created by older artists is rarely sentimental. It looks unblinkingly into the dark ahead. In both life and art, endings are often harder than beginnings. It's why we should cherish them. That was by Teddy Jameson. The Herald, the 9th of September, and the Voices section. Protecting lives and livelihoods, now and for a net zero future. That's by Stephanie O'Gorman. We are living in unprecedented times, lurching from one crisis to the next, with governments making temporary fixes to stem the tide until normal life resumes. However, returning to business as usual is unlikely, given the climate crisis. The climate crisis, like the energy crisis, is on our very doorstep, with dangerous heat waves, fires and flooding harming people and nature. Hindsight teaches us that early action saves money and lives. For example, if we had improved the energy efficiency of our buildings 10 years ago, the impact of the energy crisis would not be so devastating now. The Climate Emergency Response Group, CERG, acknowledges this year's Scottish Government's programme for government does recognise many of the solutions to the cost of living crisis are in the transition to net zero. For example, widening access to fuel poverty programmes, freezing ScotRail fares, and supporting young people and those on low incomes to take up sustainable travel. The promised New Deal with local government will include tackling the climate emergency. Green jobs will be created through accelerating renewable developments. It's also good to see the promise to put public sector spend on food and catering towards healthy, low-carbon farming and foods. While these commitments are welcome, CERG urges the First Minister to be bolder and take a much longer view and invest in durable solutions. There is simply no time to waste. In a recent poll conducted for the Scottish Government, half of Scots think the government isn't doing enough to tackle the climate emergency. Scots understand the government needs to provide immediate class support and continued investment in the net zero transition, alongside private sector investment. Measures to ease the pressure on household expenses must be designed so the private sector, be it bus operators or landlords, can continue to invest in their net zero future. Look at other countries for what bold looks like. Germany introduced a temporary €9 a month public transport ticket to ease costs and encourage climate-friendly travel. Spain has introduced free travel on suburban and middle-distance trains, while in England single bus fares will be £2 for a 3-month period, albeit not until January 2023. The freeze on ScotRail fares just does not go far enough. CERG recently published proposals for unlocking delivery on the climate emergency and tackling the cost of living crisis. These included a net zero test to make sure we don't spend public money on out-of-date fossil fuel technologies or infrastructure which will have to be replaced at higher cost in a few years' time. We also propose smarter public investment in better and more affordable options for sustainable travel in city centres and beyond, and a rapid upscale in advice and training for farmers and crofters to help them invest with confidence in low-carbon, nature-friendly farming and food production. We know public spending is tight and the government's borrowing powers are limited, but pushing the cost of action into the future is not financially prudent or fair on future generations, who will bear the full costs of our inaction. We urge the First Minister to consider our proposals, focusing public money on the best ways to provide long-term solutions to the cost of living crisis, tackle climate change, improve health, and create green jobs. That again was by Stephanie O'Gorman. She's the Director of Sustainable Economics at Ramboll and a member of the Climate Emergency Response Group Steering Group. The Herald, the 9th of September in the Voices section. The Herald Diary, UFOs over Falkirk by Lorne Jackson. Food fight. Some singers warble words of woe about love. Others belt out enraged lyrics regarding man's inhumanity to man. Glasgow troubadour Rab Noakes has found something else to be angsty about. Can anyone exercise some cease and desist influence on the proliferation of exotic side salads? He thunders before adding, can we have a return to lettuce, tomato and spring onion? I like to say a not-so-fond farewell to the rocket, spinach, red onion, grated carrot and beetroot nonsense. Animated meeting. The recent death of Mikhail Gorbachev reminds Gordon Fisher from Stewarton of a friend who was police commissioner of the Icelandic force overseeing security for the 1986 Reykjavik summit between Gorbachev and President Reagan. At the end of the first night of negotiations at the French consulate, both leaders went missing. This caused much consternation between CIA and KGB agents who suspected each other of nefarious activity. A search of the consulate ensued, ending when loud laughter was heard from the basement. On entering the room, the two most powerful men in the world were discovered together, watching Tom and Jerry cartoons. Dim about acronym. Proud David Adams from Falkirk was telling a Glasgow chum about all the unidentified flying objects spotted in the skies above his hometown. The Glasgow fellow stopped our reader in mid-flow and patiently explained, you shouldn't refer to them as unidentified flying objects because scientists have discovered what they are. So, what are they? Inquired David. They're UFOs, came the knowledgeable reply. Whiskey whoopsie. We continue cringing over errors that occur while boozing. Bob Jameson was in a London hostelry when a young chap was attempting to impress his lady friend. At one point, this fellow claimed to be a fan of single malts, especially those from Islay. Alas, said Bob, he blew his credibility when he asked for the barman for 2 double Lapra Hoigs. Dough means dough. We're deciding what employment opportunities are available for Boris Johnson to prevent him going from Downing Street to Down and Out. One reader suggested he could work in a bakery, though Bryce Drummond from Kilmarnock isn't convinced. His CV includes him putting many buns in the oven, notes Bryce, which indicates he should not be allowed near the bagels. Munchable musical mayhem. We're not sure whether to believe Malcolm Boyd from Milngavie, who says he receives an email from a friend in England explaining that the Devon and Cornwall Music Festival is cancelled. They couldn't decide whether the jam or cream went on first, said Malcolm. That was by Lorne Jackson.
Hello, this is your reader Jackie. This is the Herald on Monday the 12th of September 2022. News. COVID Scotland. Infection rates increase for first time in weeks. This article is by Emma Sabliak. The number of Scots estimated to have COVID-19 has increased for the first time since the end of June. Figures from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, show 1 in around 50 people in Scotland tested positive for the virus in the week ending August the 28th. This equates to around 1.98% of the population, or 104,000 people. The slight increase comes after weeks of decline, with only an estimated 1 in 55 people being infected with coronavirus in the preceding week. A downward trajectory continued in England and Wales, according to the statistics, where an estimate of 1 in 70 and 1 in 95 people, respectively, had the virus. In Northern Ireland, the figure is 1 in 50, meaning Scotland had one of the highest rates of the 4 UK nations. Most infections have continued to be attributed to Omicron variants BA4 and BA5 since the end of June. The estimated figures are based on coronavirus tests carried out specifically for the survey on a representative population. ONS also warned that there is a higher degree of uncertainty in our estimates for Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland as regard to the infection trends. Healthcare workers and care home residents have started receiving COVID boosters and flu jabs last week as the autumn vaccination programme gets underway. It comes ahead of an expected winter wave of respiratory virus, with the flu possibly making a resurgence after a drop during the lockdown, the country's National Clinical Director warned. Speaking on the inoculation programme, Jason Leach warned a resurgence of respiratory virus this winter is likely. This article is by Emma Sabliak. The Herald, Monday the 12th of September 2022. News. Union boss urges Scottish Government to focus on tax, not London blame game. This article is by Tom Gordon. The head of Scotland's biggest public sector union has told Nicola Sturgeon to end the London blame game over budget cuts and reform the country's tax system instead. Tracy Darling, General Secretary of Unison Scotland, offered to work in partnership with the First Minister to address poverty and the cost of living crisis. Writing in the new issue of the Scottish Left Review, Ms Darling sets out a series of tax changes to raise more money for public services, including a local inheritance tax. She says ideas are a sincere proposal to work in partnership with the government. Deputy First Minister John Swinney last week announced more than £500 million of spending cuts to the Holyrood budget for the current financial year 2022-23. He also warned of more hard choices ahead, given the dramatic increase in inflation to more than 10% and an unforeseen bill of £700 million for public sector wage hikes. He and Ms Sturgeon both insisted there was no spare money, and so if the picture deteriorated, it would mean money taken away from existing commitments. They said it showed the harsh reality of Holyrood having limited tax and borrowing powers under devolution, and that far more was possible with independence. However, Ms Darling said SNP and Green ministers had yet to deploy every available tool, and it was not accurate or helpful to point to devolution constraints and blame London. She said there are many things union members simply won't be buying this winter, and the London blame game is one of them. Of course there are constraints, but the effectiveness of this Scottish Government must be gauged by how creatively it plays the hand it has been dealt. She said that after the COVID pandemics, public sector workers were angry at the prospect of more austerity with the cost of living and were saying enough is enough. But as in the pandemic, the Scottish Government could take a better, more enlightened path than the UK Government and work with others to alleviate hardship. She said, what we propose is something similar to the recent dialogue with anti-poverty agencies and the proposed summit meeting with energy companies, building alliances with the social partners and responding to the plight of workers who have repeatedly faced up to a crisis they did not cause. She lists 11 different measures, suggestions of where and how the Scottish Government could find more money for public services and those who provide them. Unison's indicative proposals include ending or cutting the £300 million a year small business bonus scheme, which has never been proven to make a difference, raising the land and business transaction tax LBTT to raise £40 million, a bigger surcharge on second home sales to raise £56 million, cutting the threshold for higher rate of income tax to raise £700 million, council tax changes to raise £70 million, and a new local inheritance tax to give councils £200 million more a year. Ms Darling said these are offered not to suggest they form a complete solution to spending issues, but as an indication of the kind of thinking that needs to be done to rescue public services from their current overlapping crisis. Many of them relate to local rather than Scottish Government. This is deliberate. Giving councils more freedom would improve public finances, diversify the funding base, and shift the focus from earned income to excess wealth. She concluded not all of the measures can be taken immediately, but they show the nature and the scale of what could be done if the political will exists to make it happen. Unison Scotland offers them up for discussion, not because we are keen to stand over every dot and comma of every suggestion. This is clearly only a preliminary sketch. They are, however, a sincere proposal to rekindle a partnership response to crisis, a willingness to stand together against the crisis, and a willingness to stand together against the dogma of Westminster and a further fatal wave of public sector austerity and poverty in Scotland. Ms Darling became Unison Scotland's first female General Secretary in March, heading up an organisation with 150,000 members north of the border. This article is by Tom Gordon.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of September 2022, From the sports section, defiant Shane Lowry hails BMW PGA Championship win for the good guys. By Nick Roger, golf correspondent. Unlucky 13, not for Shane Lowry. In his 13th appearance at the BMW PGA Championship, and 13 years after his first tour victory, the amiable Irishman finally conquered at Wentworth's West Course. On an enthralling final day, which began with a 90-minute fog delay and then featured more ding-dong than a bell-ringing contest, Lowry, who did not spill a shot all week, pipped Rory McIlroy and the valiant Jon Rahm by a single stroke at the end of an afternoon of thrilling theatre. A podium of major champions underlined the quality of the battle. The rampaging Rahm has seized the clubhouse lead in 16 under with a magical 10 under 62, and it took over 2 hours for that tally to be topped. When Lowry ticked in a birdie plot for a 65 just after 6pm, he moved to 17 under as he put the tin lid in a round that featured an eagle and 5 birdies. That left McIlroy, playing in the match behind, needing an eagle off the last to force a playoff. The 33-year-old, who edged out Lowry into the PGA title here in 2014, gave it a gallant go and left himself with a 20-footer for 3 in the par 5 18th. His putt to tie teetered on the edge of the cup but refused to drop. It was agony for McIlroy, but ecstasy for Lowry. "I'm the happiest man in the world right now," he beamed. "I love it here and I've contended in the past. This means so much to me." This was Lowry's first win since the 2019 Open Championship. A first win at Wentworth, meanwhile, was richly deserved. His fine record in the neck of the woods down the seasons includes 4 top 10s. Amid the discontent of the ongoing LIV golf rebellion, there was also defiance to Lowry's triumph. "I wanted to go out and win this tournament for myself, first and foremost, but also for this tour and everyone that stayed loyal to this tour," he said with a robust show of loyalty to the established circuits. "I feel that this is one for the good guys." Lowry is certainly one of the good guys. "I think Shane winning softens the blow," admitted McIlroy. "If it had been someone else, I might not have felt as comfortable with it as I am. Seeing a friend win is always great, and I'm really happy for him." Victor Hovland and Soren Kjelsen had been sharing the lead in an event reduced to 54 holes after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, but they became bit-part players as affairs unravelled. Rahm, runner-up in this championship in 2019, had been 6 shots off the pace heading into the final round, but produced a kind of fearsome offensive that could have been accompanied by fixed bayonets. During an extraordinary burst, the Spaniard covered his last 10 holes in 9 under, and that included a bogey. His eagle putt from 30 feet on 12 had bolstered his assault, while a 20-footer for another eagle in the last was greeted with a fist pump of great gusto. At 16 under, Rahm had set a sturdy standard with a truly majestic display of poise, purpose and polish. "The reaction you saw in the last hole was for finishing off a great round of golf," he said of his celebration of the job well done. "That was about as good as I can play that hole. I was just thinking of going as low as I could. Everything clicked today." The prospect, meanwhile, of LIB rebel Patrick Reed carting off the DP World Tour's most cherished title would have had the circuit's officials grinding their teeth into powdery stumps. The former Masters champion certainly gave it a good go, and the Texan showed his competitive fire with a sizzling 63, which propelled him into the early clubhouse lead on 14 under. "I'm sure there will be some kind of media expletive deleted storm, is the easiest way to put it," said Reed with a wry grin in the prospect of an LIV golf player taking centre stage at the prize giving. Paired with fellow LIV player Lee Westwood, the English veteran fired a 65 for 12 under. Reed revelled in the cut and thrust. "There's still some of that European and American Ryder Cup in us," he added as both players prospered in each other's company. In the end, it was Taylor Gooch who was the highest LIV finisher, in 4th and 15 under. "Who said these defectors are winding down?" "It just shows that the guys are still ready to play and guys are hungry to win and really just hungry for competition," said Reed. The competition on this final day of a unique, emotional Wentworth week has been splendid. And that article is by golf correspondent Nick Roger. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 12th of September 2022, from the sports section. Monday kick-off. Football gets it wrong over postponements. Monday Kickoff by James Morgan. The Monday Kickoff's initial reaction to football's decision to postpone matches as a mark of respect to the Queen was one of predictable apathy. Then, having thought about it a little longer, it became less understandable. In 1952, following the death of King George, matches went ahead down south and there was public outcry, especially when other sports, such as rugby union and cricket, halted as a mark of respect. Perhaps the authorities in Scotland and England found themselves in a no-win situation this time around. Play and be damned, don't play and, well, we've seen the response. Then another thought occurred. The Queen might have been patron of the SFA, but she was also invested in a similar way in many other sports, and there were some which she genuinely loved, such as horse racing and polo, which chose not to cancel matches or events unilaterally over the weekend. Furthermore, she had barely any interest in the game. 20 years elapsed between the World Cup final of 1966 at Wembley and the next time she set foot in a stadium for the opening of the new Kop at Hillsborough, and a further 10 passed before she was back at Wembley for the Euro 96 final. The matches that were postponed on Friday to mark her passing should have been enough of an act in themselves, followed by a minute's applause, if there was a fear they would be hijacked by protests, before matches on the Saturday, such as there were at youth games in Scotland at the weekend. The government directors even gave football's authorities the perfect out by saying it was up to individual bodies to decide how best to mark her death. Some have suggested that not everyone would have observed a minute's silence. There were incidents of booing at Zurich v Arsenal and at Hearts and Shamrock Rovers during the Europa League ties, and it is therefore logical to conclude that perhaps the game's governing bodies in Scotland and England feared that fan reaction might well have cast a negative light on the game. Football, for whatever reason, seems to be treated in isolation when its grand gestures tend to overlap with society's wider issues, but that is an argument for another day. Certainly a vocal reaction by supporters would have been out of keeping with the performative nature of national grief and the idea that everyone is mourning the loss of the Queen. Will someone think of the fans? And so to the moving of tomorrow's scheduled Champions League tie between Rangers and Napoli to Wednesday. There will be plenty of people who will argue that it was the right thing to do because of the strain on police resources, but without being fully apprised of the facts, it's impossible to comment on the rights and wrongs of that decision. There have already been murmurings of discontent about what it means for supporters, and rightly so. When fixtures are altered at short notice, it is, without fail, the fans who pay the highest price, both literally and figuratively. So the request for Napoli fans to stay away means Italian supporters who have bought flights and hotel rooms, so too travelling Rangers fans, will be out of pocket, as will those Rangers supporters who have made similar purchases for next month's return leg and find they are no longer permitted to attend that fixture in Naples. For supporters often chucking thousands a season to make these journeys, every pound is a prisoner. A nightmare lurking in the Cheved. We might still be in a 10-8 day period of national mourning, but that won't stop matches going ahead in the Champions League and Europa Conference League this midweek, which would only seem to highlight the incongruity of cancelling domestic matches at the weekend. Barring a last-minute intervention by UEFA, Celtic will take on Shakhtar Donetsk in Poland, where they will encounter a similar face in the form of Marian Cheved. The case of the Ukrainian attacker's time at Celtic is a curious one. His foot at Parkhead felt sealed almost from the minute he arrived in 2019, with then Celtic manager Brendan Rodgers giving the following lukewarm assessment. I can't say I know a great deal about him, but what I have seen, he's a talent and something that will probably benefit the club in the future. We've got about 1 million wingers and don't need another one. True to his word, Rodgers used Cheved sparingly, the winger playing just 3 games for the club while scoring 1 goal. He was transferred to Michelin permanently 2 years later, having spent the 2021 season on loan to the Belgian club, and joined Shakhtar this summer. A 2-goal haul in his Champions League debut against RB Leipzig, which brought his tally to 3 in 3 games since signing, suggests he's in the type of form that might have Celtic fans cursing Rodgers after the final whistle on Wednesday night. Pegula has no time to drown her sorrows. I think we could all feel a degree of empathy for Jessica Pegula for her beer-swicking moment following her defeat by Iga Swiatek during last year's quarter-finals at the US Open. Speaking to the press and television after losing to the eventual winner of the women's event, The American took several slugs of a can of Heineken while pondering life and the reporter's questions in the Flushing Media Centre. But there was more to her choice of beverage than a cure to a bout of serious soul searching. "I'm trying to pee for doping," said Pagula when asked about the beer. Poulter's hypocritical response. Few of the LIV series defectors are more permanently annoying than Ian Poulter. Poltz strikes the Monday kick-off as the kind of guy you meet on day one of a holiday, then spend the rest of the fortnight making a conscious effort to avoid. His latest shenanigans at the BMW International, an event he turned up at despite earning $1.5 million from the LIV tour already, and thus denying other less fortunate players the opportunity to earn a few quid, are a case in point. Defying a PGE request not to wear livery promoting the LIV tour, Poulter rocked up in a shirt sponsored by his LIV team Majestics, then became involved in a terse exchange with Billy Horschel prior to teeing off at Wentworth. When called out on the first point in social media, he turned all innocent, proclaiming that, at a time when the Queen had died, his interlocutor should have shown more respect, spectacularly failing to recognise the hypocrisy in his own point-scoring tweet. 19. The number of wickets which fell in just 71 overs as England and South Africa toyed with the bat in the third test at the Oval across the weekend. And that was the Monday kick-off by James Morgan.
The Herald, Tuesday the 13th of September 2022. News. Half of Scots have suffered mental illness by the age of 24, shocking research suggests. This article is by Martin Williams. Calls have been made for government to invest more heavily in physical activities, as a shocking study suggested over half of Scots may have suffered mental illness by the age of 24. Research by the University of Glasgow for the Scottish Sports Futures charity found that while NHS guidelines recommend 60 minutes of daily physical activity, only a third of young people are meeting these guidelines, representing a decrease in previous years. It said that this is likely due to sedentary behaviour developed during the lockdowns. The findings conclude that 12 to 15-year-olds are the less active age group and that girls remain too embarrassed to participate. It found that some 90% of young people use local streets and pavements for activity with no access to sports facilities, and that activity leaders do not know how to be inclusive with young people with a disability. Now SSF is calling on the Scottish Government, sporting governing bodies and local authorities to significantly invest more in access to physical activities and access to sports facilities for young vulnerable people, following what it called shocking findings, highlighting the challenges facing young Scots living in poverty and the impact of COVID-19 lockdowns. The research went on to find that 26 of some 40 people who were interviewed for the study reported having a mental illness by the age of 24, and some had developed problems before the age of 14. It found that girls were more likely to suffer and were more likely to worry that they had missed something their friends had seen on social media. The SSF say the interviews were not comprehensive of the experiences of young people across Scotland, but acts as a guide for future strategy and can be used in identifying and understanding key challenges of young people. Between 500,000 and 700,000 people in Scotland were estimated to have suffered from an adverse childhood experience, ACEs. Individuals with more than 4 ACEs were more likely to be at a higher risk of obesity, to smoke, experience a limiting long-term condition, have a cardiovascular disease, have lower mental well-being, and not meet physical activity guidelines. The charity commissioned the literature and data review alongside interviews of young people To better understand the trends affecting young people in Scotland today, the role of physical activity, and the impact COVID-19 and the lockdowns played in their lives. It found that poverty was the greatest barrier to health and well-being and the driver of emotional challenges. 1 in 4 children in Scotland live in poverty, and 1 in 5 live in absolute poverty. It found that Glasgow has the highest rate of childhood poverty in Scotland, with a reported 34% of young people living in relative poverty, and almost 50% of families surveyed in Glasgow highlighted financial strains or difficulties from the pandemic. The analysis states that young people were more likely to be less physically active, are at higher risk of obesity, have higher levels of stress and depression, and experience social isolation, shame and stigma. Non-white people living in poverty were more likely to experience additional barriers. Kirsty McNabb, Chief Executive of Scottish Sports Futures, said, "We pride ourselves in being truly needs-led, to understand and then adapt services to alleviate the effects of living in poverty. However, we wanted to get up-to-date facts and figures alongside real-life lived experience post-COVID. This is shocking evidence of the harsh reality of living in deprived communities. Sport, physical activity combined with human connection and services working together can play a huge part in addressing and improving mental and physical health, buffer the effects of trauma and ACEs, and build skills and qualifications to bridge the attainment gap. Now is the time for significant investment to ensure things do not get worse." Kirsty Giles, Project Manager at Violence Reduction Unit Scotland, said, "This new report highlights the need now, more than ever, for us to invest in our young people's health and well-being. Access to sport and physical activity is a proven successful conduit to that. We all want what is best for young people. Taking a trauma-informed approach to helping them must involve listening to young people's voices, in particular those facing poverty and inequalities. The research is clear. Young people across Scotland need our support, and it is crucial we all work together to ensure they are provided with hope for the future. We will support SSF as a partner in continuing their trauma-informed work in changing lives through sport and physical activity." This article is by Martin Williams.
Recorded from the Herald on the 13th of September 2022, from the sports section, recorded by Amy. Celtic star Kyogo named Premiership Player of the Month for August, by Roddy McKenzie. Kyogo Furuhashi has completed a treble of individual awards for Celtic in the first month of the season after being voted Cinch Premiership Player of the Month for August. The Japanese forward had a stellar month, scoring in all 4 of the Champions SPFL games in August, including a hat-trick in the 9-0 demolition of Dundee United at Tannadice. He was also on target in the wins over Ross County, Kilmarnock and Hearts in Celtic's unblemished start to the campaign. Teammate Jota won the Cinch Goal of the Month award, and manager Ange Postecoglou was named Glenn's Manager of the Month for August. That article was by Roddy McKenzie. Recorded from the Herald on the 13th of September 2022, from the sports section, recorded by Amy. UEFA rules explained ahead of Rangers vs Napoli National Anthem Queen tribute, by Ewan Payton. Rangers plan to play the national anthem prior to their Champions League clash with Napoli on Wednesday night. The Ibrox side have confirmed that the crowd will sing the anthem in memory of Queen Elizabeth II. Rangers will play their first match since the sad passing of Her Majesty tomorrow against the Serie A Giants. A minute's silence will take place as per UEFA instructions. Afterwards, before the 8 p.m. kick-off, Rangers say the national anthem will be played. This has led to several reports stating that Rangers would be defying UEFA rules should they do so. So what do the governing body's rules entail? In the regulations of the UEFA Champions League under Article 42, match protocols are explained. Subsection 42.03 addresses the issue of national anthems. It is clear that they are not permitted. It states, as from the playoffs, the walk-on music provided by UEFA must be played from when the players emerge from the players' tunnel until they have lined up, at which point the UEFA Champions League anthem provided by UEFA must be played. National anthems may not be played. Therefore, technically, if Rangers do play the British national anthem prior to the game, they would be in breach of UEFA's rules. However, as stated in our previous piece, UEFA will be not taking their famous Champions League song before games involving teams from the UK as part of their process to mark respect for the late monarch. This was observed at Anfield on Tuesday night for Liverpool versus Ajax. It remains unclear at this time whether a discrepancy could be in place for British sides on this occasion. We have contacted UEFA for comment. That article is by Ewan Payton.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.